Nobody tells you this directly, but the world isn't kind to those who show weakness. It might seem harsh, even uncomfortable, but observe calmly. Every time you hesitate, over-explain yourself, try to be understood all the time, someone, on some level, loses respect for you, not because people are bad, but because real human nature responds to signals, and weakness, when exposed without control, is interpreted as permission. Permission to advance, to test limits, to put you in an inferior position. This is where most people go wrong. They believe that being totally transparent, emotional, and accessible will generate connection, when, in reality, it often generates unnecessary vulnerability. And in the game of life, whether in business, relationships, or day-to-day decisions, those who don't control their own image end up being controlled by the perception of others. Now think about this. What if everything you've learned about being strong is incomplete? What if it's not about being tough all the time, but about knowing exactly when to show it and when to hide it? Machiavelli already said, almost surgically, that it's not enough to be, you have to appear to be. The appearance of virtue, emotional control, the calculated use of force. All of this isn't about empty manipulation, but about strategic survival. Because ultimately, the end justifies the means when the goal is not to be swallowed up by a system that rewards those who understand the hidden rules. And here's the turning point. It's not about becoming cold or distant, but about becoming conscious. Conscious of your own worth, your own emotions, and above all, the invisible dynamics that govern human behavior. Throughout this video, you'll realize that mastering the situation doesn't begin outside. It begins within. It begins when you stop reacting automatically, when you understand the power of silence, when you learn to be feared enough to be respected, but intelligent enough to avoid being hated. You'll see that every choice, every word, every inaction communicates something. And that, when all of this is done intentionally, you stop being just another player in the game and begin to influence the game itself. It may seem intense, and it is. But the truth is, once you see this, you can't unsee it. The question now isn't whether you'll use this knowledge. It's whether you'll continue playing on autopilot or finally take control. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. He learned early on, perhaps too late, that the world doesn't reward those who feel too much, but rather those who know when to stop feeling. Initially, he reacted to everything. Criticism shook him, praise inflated him, rejection paralyzed him. He was like a rudderless boat, carried by any emotional wave that came his way. But over time, he perceived a silent pattern. The people who truly ran the game rarely showed what they were feeling. They observed, they calculated, they waited, and then they acted, not because they were cold by nature, but because they understood something few accept. Uncontrolled emotion is a form of exploitable weakness. And ultimately, politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands this: inner control before any external action. He began to test this in his daily life. In a work discussion, for example, while everyone else raised their voices, he lowered his. While others reacted, he paused. The result? He gained respect and information, because those who talk too much reveal too much. Over time, he realized that controlling emotions wasn't about becoming a stone, but about choosing when to feel and when to use silence as a weapon. Instead of exploding in the face of injustice, he would write it down. Instead of impulsively responding to a message, he would let it cool down. A simple trick he began to apply: whenever he felt the urge to react immediately, he waited 10 minutes. That alone completely changed the outcome. And more, he began to study human behavior. Books like Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature opened his mind to invisible patterns. He came to understand that most people are emotionally predictable, and those who understand this play on another level. This connects directly to something few admit. Decisions based on real human nature always win over decisions based on impulse. And in this game, it's not the one who feels the most who wins. It's the one who feels best who wins. But there's an even deeper detail, almost uncomfortable to accept. Emotions are manipulable, both your own and others. And those who don't control their own end are being controlled by others. He began to notice this in social settings. Someone irritated influenced the entire atmosphere. Someone insecure contaminated decisions. So he decided to become the neutral point, the stable center. He didn't react to pressure. He absorbed, analyzed, and returned it with precision. That's virtue in action, internal control combined with external reading. And curiously, the more he controlled his emotions, the more he seemed in control of the situation as a whole. People began to project an image of strength onto him, that appearance of virtue. But inside he knew it wasn't about seeming strong, it was about not being predictable. And when someone ceases to be predictable, they begin to become dangerous in the best sense of the word. Because in the end, those who cannot be read cannot be controlled. And this inevitably leads to an even more strategic question. What is more effective, to be loved or to be feared? It took him a while to accept this truth, because it goes against everything he'd been taught since childhood. They said that being liked was the way, that winning people's affection was synonymous with success. And for a while, he believed it. He was kind, available, overly understanding. He always tried to please, avoid conflicts, keep everything in harmony. But there was a silent problem in all of this. People only respect as much as they need to. And when they realize there are no consequences, that there are no real limits, they start to push their luck. First a small act of disrespect, then a greater demand, until the point where he no longer had any control over the situation. That's when he understood in practice something Machiavelli had already said with surgical coldness. It's better to be feared than loved, as long as you avoid being hated. Because love is volatile, it depends on emotions, on expectations, while fear, when well balanced, creates structure, order, predictability. And in the real game, that's worth more than sympathy. But don't confuse fear with aggression or violence. That's the mistake amateurs make. Effective fear isn't noisy, it's silent. It's the kind of presence that makes someone think twice before crossing a line. He began to apply this strategically. For example, in the workplace, he stopped accepting tasks that clearly weren't his responsibility. Before, he would say, "Okay, I'll do it." Now, he would calmly say, "That's not part of my scope." Without shouting, without over-justifying, just asserting himself. And the curious thing? People started to respect him. Not because he became more likable, but because he made it clear that there was a boundary. Another simple example, responding to messages in his own time, not immediately. It seems like a detail, but it changes the power dynamic. Someone who is always available without a filter becomes predictable, and predictability in this context is weakness. This is the calculated use of force. It's not about crushing, but about knowing when and where to apply pressure. Over time, he realized that true power lies in balance, to be feared enough not to be disrespected, but not to the point of generating hatred, because hatred mobilizes, unites enemies, creates resistance. Controlled fear, on the other hand, disciplines. And here comes another crucial point, the appearance of virtue. He continued to be polite, smiling, maintaining a positive social image. But now there was something behind it, an invisible firmness. A feeling that, if necessary, he could act differently. This creates a deeper, almost instinctive kind of respect. And little by little, he began to understand that it's not about choosing between being loved or feared, but about knowing when each best serves his objective. Because ultimately, the end justifies the means when the game is strategic survival. And whoever masters this duality begins to perceive something even more powerful, which is often not about being something, but about appearing to be. And that's when the game starts to get more interesting. It took him a while to realize that the world doesn't necessarily reward those who are most truthful, but those who know how to position themselves better. At first, he believed that being completely transparent was an absolute virtue. He spoke his mind, showed his intentions, and trusted that this would be seen as strength. But reality showed him something else. Too much information exposed becomes weakness. People start to read you, predict your moves, anticipate your decisions. And at that moment, you stop being a player and become a pawn. That's when he understood an uncomfortable but extremely real principle. The appearance of virtue is more useful than pure virtue. It doesn't mean being false for the sake of being false. It means being strategic. He began to adjust his communication. Not everything needed to be said. Not every intention needed to be revealed. Sometimes silence communicates more power than any long explanation. And this, in practice, completely changes the game. Gradually, he began to build a kind of functional persona. In social settings, he was more relaxed, more approachable. In negotiations, firmer, more direct. In conflict situations, more neutral, almost impenetrable. It wasn't inconsistency, it was constant adaptability. He realized that intelligent people aren't rigid. They mold themselves to the situation. A practical example, in an important meeting, instead of showing all his ideas at once, he would only reveal part of them, observe the reactions, gauge the atmosphere. This gave him a huge advantage. While others exposed themselves completely, he operated with information control. Another detail he began to apply: neutral facial expressions at strategic moments. It may seem simple, but this confuses those trying to read you, and those who can't read you can't anticipate you. This is politics guided by reality, not by ideals, understanding that the social game is, above all, perception. But there's an even deeper level to all of this. When you master your own image, you begin to influence collective perception, and perception in the end shapes reality. He realized that strong leaders throughout history never showed everything they were. They showed what was useful to show. This connects directly to virtù and fortuna, inner skill combined with reading the right moment. He didn't need to lie. He just didn't need to be completely transparent. And ironically, the more he controlled what he showed, the more people projected onto him qualities he didn't even need to affirm. Confidence, authority, security, all of that arose in the minds of others. Because the human mind hates emptiness, it fills it with assumptions, and whoever understands this controls narratives without needing to say much. But this game has a price. It demands coldness, it demands discipline, and above all, It demands that you abandon something that holds many people back without realizing it: guilt. He began to notice something unsettling. It wasn't the external rules that limited him the most. It was the inner voice that pulled him back. That uncomfortable feeling after saying no, that weight after prioritizing himself, that silent doubt when making a strategic decision. They called it conscience, but in practice, it was often just conditioning, an invisible leash. From an early age, they taught that thinking of oneself first was wrong, that setting limits was selfishness, that winning at any cost was ugly. But nobody talks about the other side. The real world doesn't work based on pure ideals. It works based on interests, power, and positioning, and that's when he understood something uncomfortable but liberating. Guilt, when misunderstood, is not a virtue. It's a control mechanism, and whoever doesn't break free from it never truly plays the game, because they always hesitate at the decisive moment. He didn't become cold overnight. It was a process. First, it started with small decisions, saying no without over-explaining, stopping the need to justify simple choices. A clear example: before, when he refused something, he felt the need to give a long explanation, almost apologizing for existing. Now he simply said, "I can't," period, without guilt, without burden. And the curious thing, people accepted it better, because confidence conveys authority. Another practical example: stopping carrying problems that weren't his. How many times does someone throw a responsibility at you and out of guilt you take it on? He began to identify this and return the favor with elegance. This isn't a lack of empathy, it's a calculated use of force. It's understanding that if you overburden yourself to please others, in the long run you lose power. And power, in the real world, defines who dictates the rules and who merely follows them. Over time, he realized that eliminating guilt didn't mean losing values, but rather choosing which values truly make sense, because many of them were implanted without question. He began to filter: does this strengthen me or limit me? If it limits me, it needs to be revised. This type of mindset is what differentiates those who live reacting to what society expects, from those who make decisions based on real human nature. And ironically, the less guilt he felt, the clearer his thinking became, the more precisely he acted. Emotions cease to interfere with strategy, and this creates a huge silent advantage, because while many are paralyzed by internal conflict, he is already executing. But this new level of clarity brings an inevitable consequence. You begin to understand that talking too much, explaining too much, exposing yourself too much is not intelligent. And that, often, true power lies in something few master: silence. He realized this after a few silent setbacks that no one saw, but he felt. Every time he talked too much about his plans, something went wrong. Not because the plan was bad, but because energy was wasted. Opinions arose, envy appeared, external expectations began to interfere. That's when he understood a simple but brutally effective rule: those who talk a lot execute little. And those who truly execute speak only what is necessary. Most people feel an almost uncontrollable need to share what they are going to do, as if this validates the action. But in practice, this creates unnecessary exposure. And exposure, in the strategic game, is vulnerability. He began to test the opposite. He kept ideas to himself. He planned alone. He acted without warning, and he only showed results. This completely changes the dynamic. Because when you show up with something concrete, there's no room for interference, only for reaction. In everyday life, this translates into simple but powerful actions. He stopped discussing new projects with everyone. Instead of saying, "I'm going to start something new," he started and then showed it. He stopped posting every step on social media, creating a more private and at the same time more strategic life. A clear example, he decided to improve his physical condition. Before, he would announce it, buy clothes, talk about diet. Now, he disappeared for a few weeks, trained in silence, adjusted his diet, studied the basics, simple things like maintaining consistency and avoiding excesses. The result? When he returned, the change was visible, and that generates much more impact than any speech. Another important point: avoid unnecessary discussions. Not every provocation deserves a response. Sometimes, silence communicates more mastery than any argument. This is virtue applied intelligently, knowing when to act and when to simply observe, but strategic silence goes beyond not speaking. It also involves knowing what to hide. Not every thought needs to be shared. Not every reading of the environment needs to be revealed. He began to observe people more, listen attentively, notice patterns. Those who talk too much usually reveal their intentions without realizing it, and those who listen attentively gather information. And information, in this context, is an advantage. He began to use this in negotiations, in conversations, even in casual interactions. While others filled the space with words, he left pauses, and these pauses made others talk more. It's almost automatic, and in the end, whoever has more information has more control. This connects directly to the idea of your own loyal armies. You build your base discreetly, strengthen your position without fanfare. And when you decide to act, you're already a few steps ahead, because ultimately the game isn't about who makes the most noise. It's about who gets to the result first. And when the result becomes the main focus, another rule starts to make even more sense. He resisted this idea at first. It sounded harsh, almost immoral. After all, he had been taught that intention was what mattered, that acting the right way was enough. But reality was direct with him. The world doesn't measure intention, it measures results, and that changes everything. Because when you start to observe carefully, you realize that those who truly advance aren't those who play fair all the time. It's those who know how to adapt the rules to the context. It's not about being unethical on impulse, but about understanding that rigid morality can make you predictable, limited, and predictability in this game is weakness. He began to see this in simple situations, extremely correct people being overtaken by more strategic ones. And then the question began to bother him. Do you want to be right, or do you want to win? Because often you can't have both at the same time. And it is at this point that decisions based on real human nature make more sense than decisions based on ideals. He began to apply this carefully, almost as an experiment. Instead of clinging to how it should be, he started asking, what works here? For example, in a negotiation, he realized that being completely transparent about limits and interests diminished his bargaining power. So he adjusted. He didn't lie, but he also didn't reveal everything. This increased his room for maneuver. Another practical example, understanding timing. Sometimes doing the right thing at the wrong time generates a bad result. But an imperfect action at the right time generates progress. He began to observe this in the market, in business, even in personal relationships. Whoever masters timing and context masters the result. And that is the calculated use of force. It's not acting impulsively, but rather strategically. It's looking at the scenario as a chessboard, where every move has a consequence. And on this chessboard, the winner isn't the one who plays the prettiest game. The one who plays best wins. Over time, he realized that this principle isn't about coldness. It's about responsibility. Because when you understand that the outcome depends on you, you can no longer hide behind good intentions. You can no longer say, I tried. You either deliver or you don't. This kind of mindset requires maturity because it eliminates excuses. And at the same time, it puts you in a much more controlled position. You start acting with more clarity, less hesitation. And that creates a huge difference in the long run. But there's a delicate point here. How far to go? What's the limit? Because when the focus is on results, the temptation to go beyond what's necessary appears. And it's at this moment that an even more strategic decision comes in. Understanding that in some scenarios, leaving loopholes can be dangerous. Because in the end, misplaced mercy doesn't strengthen. It gives the other person time to reorganize. And that's when the game starts to get more intense. He understood this when he lost an opportunity that seemed already won. He had the advantage, he had control, he even had the respect of those involved. But he decided to ease up. He thought he didn't need to go all the way, that he could back off a little, be flexible, give space. And that's exactly when everything changed. Because the other side, which seemed weakened, used that space to reorganize. In a few days, the scenario changed completely. That left a mark. It was the first time he realized in practice that poorly positioned mercy is not a virtue, it's a loophole. And a loophole in competitive environments becomes an attack. It was hard to accept, but necessary. When you decide to act, you need to go all the way. There is no half control. Either you dominate the situation, or the situation dominates you again. This doesn't mean blind aggression, but rather strategic clarity. Knowing exactly what the objective is, and not stopping before consolidating it. From that point on, he began to act more precisely. If he entered a project, he would see it through until it was well structured, without relying on weak factors. If he took a position, he consolidated his authority before relaxing. A simple example, in a professional environment, instead of just delivering a task, he began to anticipate next steps, reduce potential failures, and close gaps. This created a position of strength because it left no room for questioning or easy replacement. Another practical example, in negotiations, he stopped accepting vague agreements. Everything needed to be clear, defined, and tied up. Because a poorly defined agreement is an invitation to future problems. This is politics guided by reality, not by ideals, understanding that the world doesn't work on the basis of good intentions, but on the basis of structure. And a strong structure prevents the return of conflict. When you close all doors, there's no way for a counterattack, but there's an even more advanced level to all of this. Total domination isn't about crushing the other, it's about controlling the environment. He began to realize that when you define the context, the rules, the pace, you're already ahead before the game even starts. This connects to the idea of your own loyal armies. You build your base, strengthen your position, reduce external dependencies, and the less you depend, the more control you have. He applied this to simple things, creating your own source of income, developing your own skills, not depending emotionally on external validation. All of this increases your level of autonomy. And autonomy in the end is real power, because those who depend negotiate. Those who don't depend decide. And when you reach that level, you begin to realize that the game is no longer about winning isolated plays. It's about something much bigger. It's about understanding the rules and, if necessary, rewriting them. He thought that winning meant making better moves than others, playing better, deciding better, acting faster, and for a while that worked. But there was something beyond that. Something that only became clear after observing more deeply. The true players aren't just inside the game. They shape the game itself. They influence rules, perceptions, narratives, and that completely changes the level of the competition. Because when you control the environment, you don't need to fight so much within it. It was at that moment that he understood the most advanced layer of all this. It's not enough to master emotions, it's not enough to be feared, it's not enough to act in silence. You need to learn to influence how others perceive reality, because in the end, people don't react to what is real. They react to what they perceive as real, and whoever controls perception controls behavior. He began to apply this almost invisibly. Instead of trying to convince directly, he started shaping the context. A simple example: in an important conversation, before presenting his idea, he created the scenario. He introduced concepts, raised points, guided the other person's reasoning, until when the proposal emerged, it already seemed natural. It wasn't imposition, it was guidance. Another practical example: positioning. He began to pay more attention to how he was perceived: posture, tone of voice, presence. Not out of vanity, but as a strategy, because the appearance of virtue remains one of the strongest pillars of influence. People trust more in what seems solid, and that can be built. He also began to understand the value of storytelling. Whoever tells the story defines the meaning. And often winning isn't just about winning, it's about making others believe that it was always inevitable. That's virtue combined with fortuna, skill in acting and sensitivity to seize the right moment. But there's something even more subtle in all of this. When you begin to understand the game at this level, you realize you no longer need to react to everything. You don't need to engage in every dispute, because you're already operating on a higher level. While many fight for positions, you define the board. This doesn't mean total isolation, but rather selectivity, choosing where to invest energy, where to intervene, where to simply observe. He began to act with less urgency and more precision, and this generates a kind of silent power that few can explain, because it's not noise, it's not brute force, it's context control. And at this point, everything connects: emotional control, positioning, silence, strategy. Nothing was isolated, everything was part of a construction. And those who reach this point understand that the game was never about strength. It was always about clarity. Clarity of oneself, of others, and above all, of the environment. Because those who see clearly don't need to run. They only need to move at the right moment. Now, the question that really matters isn't, does this make sense? It's, what are you going to do with this from now on? Because knowledge that isn't applied becomes an illusion of progress. And deep down, you've already realized, maybe even before starting this video, that something is out of alignment. Maybe you're giving in too much, overreacting, over-explaining, and without realizing it, handing control of your own life over to others. So tell me, where are you still unnecessarily showing weakness? In what situation do you know you should take a stand, but you back down? What decision are you postponing for fear of judgment? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're necessary, because it's precisely in them that the turning point lies. Now imagine how your life changes when you start applying this, even little by little, when you control your emotions instead of being controlled by them, when you understand when to speak and when to be silent, when you stop seeking approval and start building respect. This isn't about becoming distant, it's about becoming conscious, someone who understands the game, who reads the environment, who makes decisions based on reality, not illusions. And above all, someone who doesn't depend on the validation of others to act. This is the kind of person who naturally takes control, not because they force it, but because they take a stand. And taking a stand, in the end, is power. So now I challenge you. Are you going to continue being predictable, or are you going to start acting strategically? Are you going to continue reacting to what happens, or are you going to start shaping what happens around you? Because the difference between those who are controlled and those who control isn't about luck. It's about the silent choices that no one sees. If this content made you think, then you've already taken the first step. But it doesn't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, because what you saw today is just the surface of a much deeper game. And the more you understand, the less you'll go back to being the same.